So Vipul, not Vipul, Chirag,
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's really a pleasure once again. So the floor is yours for 1 hour. Go ahead and have fun.
Great. Thank you. Right. So welcome everybody to Power Saturday Paris. It's great to be here, and this is my third time. So really kind of one of the events that's very close to my heart, and just basically, learning as much as I can from all the other speakers. And I know a lot of it is French content, but sometimes the visuals are more powerful to learn from that. So sit back, relax, and we've got it about just less than an hour. And so my session is about rolling out Power Platform services around Power Apps and Power Automate into your organization and managing them effectively. And pretty much it is out there already for any organizations who are using Microsoft 365 for their Teams, SharePoint, and so forth. But what happens as I visit, many organizations, and in an administrator role or capacity, I do find that Power Apps, Power Automate's usually just left for the business, which is exactly what it should be, but often overlooked by some kind of governance or even a structured way of administering the Power Platform environment. So this session pretty much targets that kind of scenario. And if you happen to be an administrator who looks after many services, like Exchange, SharePoint, and that Power Platform is just something that's left on the side. It is important as an administrator that you are fully aware of, the ins and outs of really just, getting the handle of managing your Power Platform environment. So that's what the session's about. And I'm Chirag Patel. I'm a Microsoft MVP and a certified trainer. And in terms of a bit about myself, techchirag.com is the best way to reach out to me, and you can follow all the links and everything else from the blog site to connect with me on social media and other places. But generally, I work within the Microsoft 365 space, covering all kinds of workloads, deployment, migration, or simply just enhancing the existing investments on the Microsoft 365. I'm also a organizer for the Microsoft 365 UK user group, which happens on a monthly basis, and the next one is around 16th of June. So you're welcome to join that. And also, I'm a BCS, British Computer Society approved Chartered IT membership assessor, excuse me. And really what that means basically is that in addition to not just, kind of doing all the wonderful tech that I learn and share on Microsoft 365, but all that basically means is that I try to tap into various IT talents that's out there in order for them to follow the best practices of the knowledge and experiences around the IT industry. So basically making IT good for the society. Been around for 20 odd years, started off as SQL Server DBA, and then I've kind of worked all the way from SharePoint on-prem, various versions, and from Office 365 back in 2012, all the way like Microsoft 365, which is in the last couple of few years. And so really that's pretty much what I'm about. So, and I tend to speak at a lot of events. And so, these are some of the events I've spoken over the years, and you'll get the slides today later on, and all these are clickable, so do check out other community events that happen around the world. So I tend to speak about various topics, so Microsoft 365, SharePoint, Teams, the whole thing. So hopefully that might be of benefit to you. Okay, so a couple of slides just to really kind of set the scene, and if you've attended recently a couple of events like Microsoft Build and the Business Application Summit, which happened just kind of in the last few weeks ago, then one of the things Jeff Teeper, who's the leader of Microsoft Teams there, kind of put this slide out there, and there's a blog article there which kind of details out to position in terms of when it comes to developing the applications, and obviously Power Platform is very much the key part of that. Certainly for business developers, or the term we use, citizen developers, but also it's targeted for the professional developers and being able to extend those capabilities into their own customized solutions. Then really what you see here is that any solutions you develop, they're pretty much targeted for any devices on any platforms, or certainly that's what you should be looking at anyways. And of course, Teams is become the place for it. It's become the wrapper for a lot of the solutions that are being built, that it has to pretty much go through the team hosting as a kind of a way to have that adoption for the users to engage not just with their daily collaboration activities, but also all the application integrations that happen. And Power Apps, Power Automate is very much kind of part of that. But then you've also got that layer of around the data, because if you're familiar with Microsoft Graph, then you will know that you're able to connect to any services and being able to just query all those data elements for SharePoint or Exchange, Mailbox, whichever it is, and being able to bring all those experiences and as well as being able to use through the Power Platform environment as well. So you kind of got that layered structure around that, and obviously the whole thing is underpinned by that identity solution that you get as part of your tenant, which is your Azure Active Directory. So that's pretty much what drives all the security experiences in terms of what you have access to is what you're going to get. So hopefully that kind of puts the things in perspective in terms of where Power Platform kind of sits within that elements of the logics and data side of things. Again, you probably are familiar with some of these numbers. They've been going around with few conferences, but again, I think these numbers that you see here are mainly targeted for the US. Of course, is expected, through some of the works from the Gartner as well, that potentially 500 million apps will be built in the next 5 years, not just within Power Platform area, but also other technologies in the IT. We seriously have a shortfall of talent, not just developers, but also the IT pros. And what this essentially means is that whether as administrators who are looking after the environments, whether we like it or not, we pretty much have to be ready and be able to respond to those kind of scenarios when this basically just grows and grows and grows. And with that, obviously the complexity will come as well as some of those solutions mature in terms of how the Power Platform kind of rolls out. But essentially you got your 4 categories of these apps and services. You got your application for Power Apps, workflows for your Power Automate, and being able to build chatbots to target your organization with the question and answer kind of pattern, so through various mediums on employee engagements and all those things, and being able to build those dashboard analytics. So you got that perfect stack of that process driven applications. I know some organizations that I visit, there's very few that I've visited who don't really even use Power Platform in any way or shape or form, other than the IT who might be using it just for themselves and not really kind of comfortable because of that whole element of not being able to support the platform, and they might end up using some alternative third-party solutions, which then creates, in my view, a bit of a not so competitive advantage in terms of having that talent who can use any language or any platform and still be able to get onto Power Platform to build solutions. So there are scenarios where you will have some organizations who just don't use this, but for most of them, we're pretty much kind of embraced with that, because we get as part of that the Microsoft 365 license. Although license is not my strongest area, which many of folks in the community will kind of admit to that. So there are some different licensing arrangements there. So we'll take a look at that briefly, just shortly. So if you look at from the governance administration side of things, and as admin being the bigger part of it, and this is not just for the Power Platform, but it kind of, if you look at it from this perspective of that, you get essentially your, say, your main production tenant, in which that tenant you've obviously got all your workloads targeting, like Exchange, SharePoint, and Power Platform as well. But Azure obviously is at the heart of it in terms of controlling some of those security experiences around the DLP or the identity management side of things, or even device controls. And all that can be done through the Azure environment. So your role may stretch into either you have to manage some of the Azure workloads and also being able to manage your Power Platform, or you probably have a dedicated teams who looks after just the Exchange and Teams. For your collaboration and applications, you may have just the SharePoint administrators, and then you may have the SharePoint administrators potentially, let's say, who might even look after the Power Platform administration side of things. Depending on how that falls around, it's kind of important to understand that in terms of to have that Power Platform end to end, then these are the fundamental three pieces of it to get that right. And so we'll look at, in terms of the demos, some of these examples in terms of how you can kind of bring all those things together. But as the role goes, and unlike with any other systems, you have to almost prioritize in terms of some of these things you may already have enabled in your environments. Some of it may obviously not been looked at or may be open for discussion. But essentially, as kind of the documentation has got a lot better because Power Platform is one of the fast pace of changing and technologies, name changes, features constantly being added. But really, kind of, you got that in three buckets, if you like, to be able to effectively manage your environment, which is obviously through your kind of the roles, the user management, licensing, and being able to set up the environments, but also securing those environments and also the services within those that's going to be able to connect some of those services through connectors, for example. And then the last but not least is around the monitoring and being able to have that sustained adoption. So, Center of Excellence Starter Kit, for example, brings a lot of these experience and capabilities that you have into that solution as well. So you got all those things, and you got the usual things around being able to monitor and look at those analytics as well. So we'll look at some of these things in slightly more detail. I'm going to just keep an eye on the Q&A as well, just in case if there's any questions. So please feel free to kind of just unmute yourself and just ask a question at any point, or we can save the questions to the end.
We do that. We won't interrupt you this time, and I'll just pick them up along the way and read them to you right after.
That's great. Thanks, Frank.
Okay.
Okay. So when you look at the, again, the state of your services, then yeah, your apps and flows are pretty much everywhere. As long as one has got access to it, in a way, they will not even care about what environment they're in, because if you look at it from a licensing perspective, you got your trial licenses, and then you got your individual plans, whether that's per user or maybe that's per app or per flow plan. So depending on your functionality of your solutions that you're going to roll out, your kind of the state for the licenses may vary. And typically for your Microsoft 365 licenses, you get your Power Apps and Flow with it, included as part of that, if you wanted to roll out. But obviously, you got your free trials, and if you've built the solutions and that trial license expires, then obviously you're not going to be able to access those things unless you really kind of extend in certain environments. Then you may be able to extend that. And we'll look at that as well in terms of the types of different environments you get. For the paid licenses are things, again, this document that you have, the link I've put there, that constantly changes. So there's a comprehensive documentation that details out exactly the features and the scenarios, and it is quite comprehensive. So do take a look at that to make sure that you got the right licenses deployed in that areas. So how do you access the Power Platform environment? Now, up until, from an administration perspective, there used to be multiple admin centers, and a lot of that actually has gone. So, for your user and license management, you would go to your normal Microsoft 365 admin center where you manage your users and all licenses. And that's the place to go for it, to be able to manage all the license and everything else. But when you look at from a Power Platform admin center, then a lot of it is gone into just that one single admin center, which is your Power Apps, your Power Automate, and all those things. But now you just got a menu link that you got access to Power BI. So Power BI is still a dedicated admin center. So you still have two places to go to for it, but in order to access, at least you got that one URL to get from to. From the portal's perspective, as a user, when they creating the solution, there's only two portals for that, whether it's make.powerapps.com or flow.microsoft. Either way, or through office.com, you can kind of access your app launches through those services to access those particular areas. Now, obviously, as far as these URLs go, they're kind of universal, obviously, but you have more details around the specifics of the admins and the portals to kind of look into those areas as well. So just the last slide before we go into the demos side of things. So one of the things, whether you've rolled out or whether you're thinking of rolling it out properly, environments is the key part of it. And you can have multiple environments of different types. And the good thing about this, of course, is that with every tenant you may have, and for Power Platform, this is such a great advantage, because if you look at it from an IT perspective, typically any system would or the governance may demand that you ought to have a development environment or a test environment and also the production environment. So you may end up having 3 tenants, for example. In this particular case is that you can still have your production tenant as a single tenant, and within that single tenant you can have multiple environments. So you may decide to have, in this case, say the 3 environments, one for dev, test, and production, but also still have multiple environments in different countries, in different locations, if you like. So you have that flexibility to be able to spin up those environments and being able to also then have specific configurations and the management of it to tightly control all those things. And typically, each environment will contain all the relevant Power Apps, the flows, and the Dataverse environments in there. So the good thing about that is that also with every environment, you're able to copy or move them or backup and restore. Now, the default environment is what you get with every tenant. So it's very much limited to what you can do in order to control some of the configurations. So, for building your personal solutions and being able to build those flows, that's just, right, easy, and just to do that within a default environment. But anything that you want to do in that controlled governance way, then production environment is the way to kind of do that altogether. So you can do all those things, and again, I've put the links there as well, which drives you in a lot more detail exactly what you can do in which environments and so forth. So let's take a look at that, exactly what that's about. So I have a fictitious demo tenant here, Contoso Electronics, popular organization as ever. And I've also got the CRM sales modules installed in this one as well, just to kind of give that complete experience around that. So typically when you come to your Power Platform admin center, or through your admin center, then you got your set of controls, the navigations around the analytics, being able to monitor some of those things, but also, you got your data policies, which we'll look at that in a bit as well. But yeah, with every environment you've got here, so in this case, I've got my tenant and everything set up, but this particular environment that I've got is a trial subscription based. And essentially, there are 2 types, if you like, in terms of getting your environment set up. So if I was to create a new environment here, and I've got 3 environments. I've got Contoso, the CRM environment, and then I've got the default, the tenant itself that comes with it. So those are my kind of environments that I've got. But if I go and set up new environment, then on the right-hand side, I can give a name what I want, but I've got about 4 options to decide on that in terms of which one's going to be. Now, Sandbox essentially will be the one you might end up using if you wanted to develop some kind of a proof of concept solutions or a potential that you might want to convert that into a, say, production, or maybe have a trial subscription based, in which case that you may end up have to pay for it after that trial kind of expires. And the trial one is just kind of a one-off. Once it's gone basically from that. So you got that choice in terms of which trial environments you want to set up. And then in this case, if I go and set up, say, a production environment, then I've got those choices in terms of the regions where I want to host that particular environment within that. So you got those choices there. And once I've picked a particular choice, then I can choose whether to create or not create that database in that particular environment, and which is pretty much where all your data regarding your Power Apps flow is going to stay. So if I go and kind of try and create that, and let's call that Chirac Sandbox or prod. And if I go and then create that environment, obviously in this particular limited environment that I have, it's not going to let me create because obviously I've got the size issues here. But if I had plenty of size, the storage and the licenses in place, then I could go ahead and create that environment easily just from even without using PowerShell. And a lot of these things you can do within your PowerShell environment. So I can quickly go and do that and then set up multiple environments to make sure that my environment structure is set up and it also aligns to the strategy of how the data and everything else is going to be managed. So if I step into the CRM environment here, and very much the Dynamics 365 is built on Power Platform as a first party. So this is my trial subscription based environment, and you can see here at the top that if I'm happy with what I've done with this particular environment and I've got everything set up, it's proving to be a success, I can then just go ahead and convert that trial subscription based into a production environment. So as soon as I go ahead and do that, then obviously it's going to try and pause obviously you want to do this in a controlled way. And similar as before, if I had enough capacity, then I would be able to convert that environment into a production. Now, because obviously, I need at least 1 gig database capacity, which I don't have. So therefore, it's not going to let me create that, change to production environment. So again, that's one of the ways you can kind of move your environments in between, if you like. And then you've got other areas to look at is that within each environment, you've got the necessary resources that are deployed in order to understand what is the state of the environment looks like. So if I go and click on Power Apps there, then this is only going to show me Power Apps in just this particular environment that's running within that across all the users and everything else that I have. So you can see that the Dynamics 365 is obviously a big part of it itself. So there are a lot of apps associated with that, and a lot of these are kind of, if you like, the 3 types of apps you get. Model-driven apps, which pretty much you have your data and everything else structured, and then being able to work from back end to the front end to be able to develop the necessary apps and screens, or you can go to the other way around in terms of where you have your Canvas apps as well. So in this case, there is no Canvas apps in which I can build the applications from, but it gives me a good view around what apps and everything else that there is that I can create. And then if I click on the Solution Health Hub, I can either share that to a particular users in terms of getting to the accessibility side of things. So again, I can just go and do all those things within here. So I can go and open the user security role, log into those details, and then being able to go and share that particular apps to the users. So I'll let that go away, close that. And then if I step back to the environment and go into the same sort of thing with the flows, that's going to give me a list of all the flows that are packed in this particular environments. And likewise, even like the portals, if I've got any apps for the external users facing as well. So all that is very manageable inside this particular area. I'm going to just step into another tenant where I've got other things deployed in there. So if I just go over to that tenant here, so this is a new tenant, sorry, another tenant that I've got, same company, Contoso Electronics, and here I've got a couple of Microsoft Teams chat spaces deployed, and then I've actually, kind of created some of the applications as any users would do to be able to create some of those apps, the Dataverse apps, which it's kind of, got rebranded 6 months ago from CDS. But if I go and click on Chirac project site, which is a regular team chat space that I have, and because I've created the app within that, then obviously in this particular scenario, what I have is I've got all the usual information that I have and any Power Apps inside that particular environment itself. So in this case, where is it on? If it loads up, yeah, I've got one of the template apps you get within Teams is the employee ideas. So if I go and click on that particular apps itself, now it should open up and take me straight into my Teams environment. But obviously, this app, it says uses features that comes with the Power Apps premium plan, which again I don't have. But if I wanted to have that premium plan in place, then I could go ahead and just use that and open up the app itself. But obviously, I'm not going to go through that wizard here. So that's how you would kind of get to, from an administration perspective, to be able to check out those apps. And then if I just go back one step before from my the Jira project environment side, then you can see here that I've got being the ability to be able to back up this environment as well as being able to restore and all those things. So again, if I go and create new backups, then I can come to restore that. Now there's a lot of functionality within this that Wesleyan is digging through, but again, this kind of varies with some of your other environments that you may get, so you may want to do that. And then yeah, flows are Power Apps, just similar to the other ones. You can sort of get to that as well. Right, so let me go back to the slides. So that was kind of a quick overview around the environments side of things. Any questions on that part?
No. I've interesting comments from Nigel about environments and how unsafe default environments can be, and the using PowerShell to deploy templates from what I get. So, but no questions. Well, I do actually have one or two.
Yeah.
How did you start your CRM environment? And it seems it's already populated with a lot of apps. Are these dynamic apps?
Yeah, sure. So I have a demo environment. So it's one of the template pack you get. So again, I've got one slide later on in terms of how you can do that. But I think as the developer program for Microsoft 365, one can create those environments very quickly. If you're a Microsoft partner, then you can create that tenant as a demo tenant with that pack.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, that's good. Yes, I do agree with Nigel. I wish environments were that easy. And yeah, there's a lot to be in there. And I think, as you say, absolutely default environment is insecure because it's just wide open. So hence governance piece is quite important in that environment, in that respect. Right, okay. So one of the cool things about, as you probably know, and if you haven't come across that, and there's no way you can, anyways, is the connectors. It's the glue that really kind of connects, not just dealing with the Microsoft services in terms of whether it's SharePoint or SharePoint lists or whatever, but the fact that you can connect to your third-party services, such as Salesforce and ServiceNow, and there's this list constantly grows. I think it's over 400. I think 480 last I checked. And these connectors essentially, they're kind of your wrappers to the actual services themselves, and they come in different varieties. Either you got your standard connectors or you got your premium connectors based on your license that you'll be able to access. And there's obviously that constant change that goes on. One major change probably last year or the year before was the HTTP connector, which used to be a standard. A lot of solutions were built around that, and then Microsoft decided to switch that into a premium connector, which all of a sudden, organizations became liable, if you like, in order to kind of pay for those licenses. So again, very well documented around this in terms of being able to monitor, and we'll look at that monitoring part a bit later on, but being able to constantly stay on top of things to understand what connectors are coming in, which will then help your business to understand that if you got any systems in place, that you're able to use those connectors and being able to surface those that data inside your Power Apps solutions. But also being able to clearly understand, what's in production and in preview. From a data protection side, and this is again easier said than done, I do spend a lot of time just to really understand that if I'm deploying a solution out there, and if a solution contains connections to those particular connectors, it's very important to really kind of put that in your solution operating kind of model, if you like, from a service governance perspective, that where does the data live, and from a GDPR perspective, if that's personal data that's going out, where does that stay? So with Microsoft, when they connect to all these connectors, then they're only connecting that connector and using that during the process when this data is getting transferred back and forth, but not physically actually storing that data in the Microsoft infrastructure. But when you got that service now, for example, there, then the underlying service of that connector is where that data is being held. So in this case, ServiceNow infrastructure is where the data held. So as a user will build the solutions, they couldn't even care less where the data lives, as long as they can get access to that data. But this is where, as administrators, they need to understand that which bits of data can be classified as, say, business data versus a non-business data. And that kind of just takes us into that area of the DLP policies. So again, these questions, if you're able to answer, and you do in this case, obviously, when every time you connect, Microsoft is doing that validation check in terms of where that data privacy issues will reside. So again, it's an important area, and it's a good documentation link there as well for the protection side of things. So they clearly explain exactly how, and diagrammatically as well, in terms of where that data lives and how it gets transported and all those things. But yeah, connectors is the big part of it, and there's quite a lot. So because we work with connectors, so it's kind of, again, I see a lot of tenants out there that a lot of focus goes into blocking the connectors. And when you look at the business kind of side of things, there's hardly any connectors, and that's not a good thing. So you ought to have, definitely the Microsoft first party connectors like SharePoint, Teams, and all those connectors. Definitely they need to be in the business data, because that's pretty much where all the business data is getting driven. But you may decide to put other service systems you have in which this data can't be kind of leaving the organization out and about, if you like. So connector in the business data is where you would normally group this, and this is where your admins will kind of define those particular policies. So if I step back to the demos, and if I go to this will be fine. Yeah. So if I go into the data policies within the Power Platform Admin Center, then I can create my new policies. So in this particular, call it just business data. And then here I'll get the choice. So again, I think we looked at about 400 connectors. So, a lot of this, so 487 is the current count. And you got all those connectors in there. Some of them I don't even know what they are. But again, as a good administrator, you'll normally search for your connectors that if you want to build those solutions in here. But in my case, I'm just going to type in Microsoft. Then as I go through this, then I can just pick my the tools in here. So I'll pick Microsoft Forms, Dataverse. I've got the message center there as well if I wanted to. So you got quite a lot of things in there you can pick, and then being able to assign those to business categories. So now I've got 4 business connectors within there. So if I go and click on them, then there's my connectors, and that's pretty much a very simple way of getting your connectors in place right now to begin with, and then you can kind of do that continuously if you wanted to. If you're going to do this, because obviously in this particular case, you're going to do this management for your environments, you can also set that as a default group for it, to say that any connectors you have which you want to put that for sensitive data, you can choose whether it's going to be a business or non-business, or make block as a default. So you have that options there to do that as well. But if I go into the next step of that wizard, I can say all the environments, dev, test makes sense, and you can just do that one size fit all approach. Or you might just choose exclude certain environments. So you might want to just leave that for your test, as long as you got policies in place to say, how you kind of go about using that. So if I go and choose that particular environment, then I can say that Chirac project side is a demo one, which I don't want to kind of include in that, and then just kind of go and work through your policy within that. So you can just say go and add that to the policy like that, and then go ahead and then just review that. So in this particular case, I've got my business data policy defined, and I've got 4 of them that's been added to it. And the scope here is to exclude certain environments, and I can change my mind and edit there if I wanted to. And then I can just go ahead and create policy. And that's kind of your easier way of making sure that the data services that you have inside your Power Platform experience, you're kind of just managing all this within the Power Platform. But that still doesn't solve the issue around that if I've got my personal device and if I want to connect to the Power Apps, these policies will still kick in, and that's great, but I can still come with my personal device and still be able to access the corporate tenant services, including Power Apps and Flow within that. Then how do you go about stopping that? So for that, you can't do that within this Power Platform Admin Center, because for that you have to head back to your the compliance center itself. Sorry, beg your pardon, into the Azure environment, in which case you will go and create a set of conditional access policies to be able to manage your device controls and other areas of the restrictions that you can put in place to make sure that the devices, certain personal devices can't access that. So here I'm stepping out of the Power Platform Admin Center and I'm into my Azure Tenant Admin Center here. So if I go and type in conditional condition, then I can go and set up my conditional access policies. And this is not just specific to Power Platform, but you can apply this to very much any part of the services within your entire Microsoft 365 tenant. So if I go ahead and create a new policy, then what I can do here, I'll just give it a name to say Power Platform. And I can then select, who is this going to apply to? Is it going to be all users, or is it going to be select users there, for example? And if I pick users and groups here, then on the right hand side, I can pick, for example, that maybe say sales and marketing, for example, can only access the Power Apps environment, if you like, for example. So I can go and select sales and marketing group. So any users, and this is like a team chat space, or you can have your other security groups in there. But in this case, I'll go with sales marketing. And then I can pick in terms of which particular apps can they access, or which ones do you want to exclude. So in this particular case, I might say include the cloud apps. And if I say all cloud apps, that's going to be across the whole tenant. But if I go into select apps here, then on the right hand side, you got your usual Office 365, which will cover your likes of OneDrive, SharePoint, and all those things. But if I type in Power, then here I can say, include Power Apps, Power BI service, or I can include Flow as well. So I'll go in and type in Flow, then I've got my own custom Microsoft Graph demo that I've got that as a custom apps there as well, so I can include that, or I can just simply connect to Microsoft Flow, which will then cater for all your flows that you have within that. So I'll go ahead and select that, and then I can choose to apply any particular conditions within that. So this again gets more into the infrastructure area, whether I want to target specific platforms. So if I go and click on device platforms, then I can say configure that either any device or a particular device platform, iOS or Windows Phone. I hardly know anyone who uses that, but it's there. But in this case, I'll just kind of leave that to no. Yeah, that's fine. And then go into the controls there, either to block access or grant access. So again, in this particular case, we want to block access for, say, the sales and marketing here to be able to not get to those power apps and flows. Then I can just say block access completely and maybe choose those controls and or require one of those controls, whichever conditions I want to use, and then select that particular policy. So, and right at the bottom left here, I can then decide to try that out before I do it for real, and which in that case you probably want to try it out to make sure it works exactly the way you would expect it to, and then you can, once you're happy with it, turn it on and job done. And that's a very easy way to kind of making sure that you got your data side of things for the DLP policies for your connectors all set and configured. And then you got that extra step to make sure that you're kind of controlling your devices as well through the Azure conditional access side of things. So hopefully that's kind of given you a flavor of administering that part when you're kind of rolling these things out. But if you look at that further, and which kind of we went through that, so you'll find all the details there and all the different permutations of kind of making sure that that conditional access policies work. But it's all about kind of picking up those signals and detecting those behaviors in terms of what you can do to allow or block, and then you just go and enforce that. So that becomes very much part of your governance areas. And then, of course, all these things will be created, and then you'll have the issues around, being able to audit some of these applications that's being developed. So typically, you got those three buckets of understanding where the activity logs are recording. So you got your Power Automate Power Apps, which does take up to about 24 hours in order to kind of see all those events that are occurring. So, in most cases like Teams and SharePoint, those audit logs happen every almost 30 minutes. But you obviously got the Power Platform DLP policies that we just had a kind of look. So all those things, if you want to have a look, then that's very easy way to kind of do that. And again, for that, you would go and use your Microsoft 365 Compliance Center. Either your information security team will do that, or if you're an administrator for all those workloads, then you will have access to that. So again, there are different service roles. You can access some of these services. So I go back to my admin center. So if I go to, I've got a shortcut there. So I'll go to, excuse me, in my compliance center. Then within here, I can go into my audit. And if you've got a new tenant that you're just rolling it out, by default, this is switched off. So you got to explicitly turn the auditing on. And then obviously things can start to record it. So, again, this is one place you will audit your entire Microsoft 365 activities. But if I go and search for here and just put in the Power, so I've got my Power BI activities there, but also then I'll go further down. Go to Power BI, Power Apps. So I've got Power Apps app activities there, so I can then go and pick, let me check on how many apps has been created. And if I go and do that, then in a way you can kind of monitor that. And that's very much ad hoc basis of doing it, because some of this you want this to be automated, and the Center of Excellence kit kind of looks into these areas to kind of bring all those things out for you. But as somebody who's starting new out, then this is very important, because what I tend to find here is that if I go in, whether that's part of your daily checks or regular checks, whichever it is part of your processes, then I can go and see that this particular app was created back, well, first it was created by myself as an administrator. And when was it created? 1st of June. But also what it means is that it gives me the actual environment name as well, in terms of which environment that was created. So that is your default ID, and then you got your app itself. Not really helpful from an admin perspective, because it doesn't tell you exactly which app it is, and for that you'll end up running something like a PowerShell script to be able to understand which app it is. But the whole point here is that depending on how you look at the governance in terms of how you deliver, whether you do it as a centralized kind of model that you kind of enforcing that everybody request IT, to create the apps and let them on, or whether you allow the users to create the apps, then this particular scenario works very well, where you can actually go and work with the user proactively and say that, I see you've created the app, how is it going, is it working, or is it going to be used, how long for, all those things. And that kind of, creates that rapport to the business users very quickly in order to understand how your environment is actually getting performed with that. So again, just one example of using the audit logs for that purposes there. The other thing you might want to do, just conscious of time wise as well, so I'll make sure there's some time for questions there. But if I go into my flow environment, so if I go and get to look at the flows, I'll go back to the home page for the flows. So within here, one of the things you might want to do is set up some of the alerts if you like. And with Flow, as you probably know, you can just pick your template, kind of just run with it. But if I go into Flow Management, search for any flows around that, then what you'll get is you'll get something that's already pre-built for you. So every time when there's a list of new apps that's going to come or flows, you can just go ahead and just create that new flow within that. So again, I won't create that right now, but just kind of setting your connections based on your admin privileges. Of course, you'll then be able to continue and then be able to create yourself those alerts, and then that way you can kind of keep monitoring what's happening. So hopefully that kind of gives you a flavor of how to set up some of those monitoring alerts. If I go into, okay, went a bit too far with this one. Yeah, and then you've got your other areas as well. So obviously that one's the most popular alerts to set up. But then you've got everything like, email me with number of flows that's created in a Power Automate today. So again, as part of your regular checks, you might want to use that particular template. Or if you've reached the limit of number of flows, like 250, for example. So you got little toolkits just without doing or without writing any code in order to kind of get yourself up to speed with some of the monitoring and administrating capabilities. So we had a quick look at that in terms of pulling some of those ongoing reports. And then, last but not least, is the section around kind of keeping a control of your entire environment. So what I've shown you so far is purely from an IT pro perspective. But again, you have to still build that governance and adoption elements of it. And Center of Excellence Starter Kit is a perfect example of that in order to kind of deploy that and, take you right from the strategy to the solution and being able to have all these things working for you. So including the bits we've seen is very much ad hoc pieces. We can bring all those things, or at least some of it, into this experience of your Center of Excellence kit. So again, very good documentation there. And as Nigel mentioned in the chat, Emmanuel obviously has worked a lot of things on this, and it's the community power there as well. So you got all that information, resources available to you to be able to try this out and install it. A couple of things to point out that if we do install this Center of Excellence Starter Kit, which, depending on if it's for Dataverse, for Teams, or production environment, there are some fundamental differences there. But a lot of these is kind of just, they'll require your per flow license due to some of the restrictions you get based on the limitations and the pagination settings there. So that's for your syncing inventory. But for everything else, you can see all that information is laid out there in terms of some of the differences within that. Mentioned earlier very quickly, because there is a lot to take in here, there's a lot to cover off, and if you wanted to really get started to make sure you understand some of all the things that I've been through today, you can access all this by signing up for free for the Microsoft 365 E5 developer subscription, which will last you for a year, or even you'll probably get renewed if you're using for development purposes. But you'll have all those things built in for you, and you simply just, when you sign up, just choose the Power Platform pack, and then you'll get all that functionality that you have. You can try it out and being able to navigate through those administration experiences. And just like with anything else, this is obviously ongoing all the time, all the features, everything else. So you got your release plans, not just for Power Platform, but also for Dynamics 365 as well. So then they come in form of this release waves, from October. In this particular way, wave is covering from last year October through to March, so you can actually see exactly what features and everything that's going rolled out. So similar to your messaging center that you have, where you actually understand what's on the SharePoint, Teams, roadmaps as well. So you got this available on the docs.microsoft site. Last but not least, some good YouTube videos and some of the Microsoft Learn kind of challenges there as well that you can take advantage of. And then obviously I use the connector reference all the time just to make sure that I understand what the connectors are in place. That's pretty much from me, but obviously if you do follow the events I'm speaking at, and we've got some great UK events coming up, and these are going to be probably the first in-person events that's going to happen. So I know France is not far from UK, so you're welcome to come and join us, and there'll be great sessions there as well that's happening around Teams and Microsoft 365 generally, including Power Platform as well. So hopefully you can join us there. And then last but not least, just want to say a big thanks to you and the team at the Power Saturday for inviting me and delivering this session to you. So hopefully you've taken something away from here, and thanks for having me. So I'll take a look at the chat now to see the questions. But yeah.
Thanks a lot,
No, you're welcome, Frank. Thanks very much.
Not really questions, but Nigel stresses out also that there could be a data loss via Outlook unless you have a Microsoft DLP as opposed to a Power Platform DLP. Could you expand on that?
Yeah. So what happens is that if you look at the Microsoft DLP side of things, so whilst that can control your SharePoint, Exchange, Teams, and everything else to prevent any of those kind of data going out, then with the connector side of things, the data will the sensitive data will be blocked depending on how you put those connectors. But otherwise, you're kind of going to put that in non-business data, then you kind of stand the risk of losing that data. I'm just looking for that particular thread, just to make sure I've got that.
Is the business and non-business, are the business and non-business groups that you mentioned default groups, or because we saw you create a business rule? Yeah, so because what happens is by default when you create the non-business data, there is the default there, right? So if you want to create the business data being the default group, so every time, for example, when the environment is connecting those connectors, then it's going to try and look for the default business data connectors, if you like. That's what that one's about. Yeah. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, it's kind of choosing that which particular group gets applied when you're applying that particular to the environment. Okay. Yeah. Well, I see no more questions. So
and yeah, he's right. Developer license and not a community plan. That got renamed, I think, isn't it? Just yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I actually don't know the Manuela that Nigel is talking about. What's her last name?
You know what? She's on my Twitter, so
oh, okay.
I'll put that. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, she's called Manuela Pilcher.
Pilcher, okay, all right.
She's part of the Power Cat team.
Yeah. If you got the link handy, Nigel, you can post that in. That'll be great.
What's
but
that?
Yeah. Hey.
Which particular link?
For Emanuela.
For Manuela. I don't know.
Yeah, that's okay. I think you can just Google it and you'll find she's done a lot of videos and a lot of documentation she's writing as well. So yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, if you go to YouTube and then just type in Manuela in search, you'll get all her videos.
Okay, cool. So between Chirag and Manuela, we have a lot to watch to improve our competences, right?
Yeah, same here. I'm learning all the time, you know, and you can see that even Nigel posted some of the, you know, some of the changes that happened. So it's just trying to keep up with it.
That's right.
It's part of the challenge. So, but that's good, you know. We're always learning in what we do. So it gets better, right?
Exactly. Yes. Okay, so we might call it over. If you're okay, so that we have a couple of minutes to go and take a coffee before the next session.
Yep, that's great.
Well,
thanks very much. Have
thanks a lot.
great
Thanks.
Power Saturday for the remainder of the day.
Thank you, and thank you very much for coming up. Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.